Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra, a song he recorded back in 1966, That's Life. It's a song that describes the ups and the downs of life, and while I may be down right now, I know that I'm going to be up again because, well, that's life. Now, I know another person who'd do a good job singing that song, and that's King Solomon, because Solomon writes about that very theme in the book of Ecclesiastes as well as in Proverbs. He describes how life works. In his observations, you'll recognize, because you know that's life. For example, Solomon says that life is not fair. Now, have you figured that out yet? Because if not, you need to. Sometimes we'll see circumstances and we'll say, hey, that's not fair. I got to ask you though, did you really expect otherwise? Our observations confirm that life isn't fair. We see good people suffer. We see bad people prosper. Solomon says, there is something else that I find to be meaningless, and it occurs on this earth. And that is, the righteous sometimes get what the wicked deserve. And the wicked sometimes get what the righteous deserve. We have an expression, may the best man win, or may the best team win. But it doesn't always happen that way. The best does not always win. Solomon says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race doesn't always go to the swiftest. And the battle doesn't always go to who's strongest. And as far as prosperity is concerned, food doesn't always come to the wise. Wealth doesn't always come to the brilliant. Favor doesn't always come to the learned and the educated. But time and chance happen to them all. You see, Solomon describes life as somewhat random and unpredictable. Now, we do try to predict and forecast, but you know how that works. A weather forecast is an educated guess, sometimes right and sometimes wrong. Now, when we look at how life operates, we can choose to talk about God working behind the scenes with what happens, or you can talk about random chance. But either way you want to describe it, from our perspective, it feels quite random. And what happens often defies our predictions and assumptions. And sometimes what happens just doesn't make any sense to us. Fact is, there are times when it seems that life stinks because there are some bad things that happen we just can't understand. Now, if you want to complain about it, take it up with management. See what he has to say. But keep this in mind. As you're complaining to God about the way his world operates, keep in mind that our sin, our disobedience, was what brought a curse upon this world. You see, there's a real sense in which we, collectively, the human race, we're responsible for a lot of the mess that we're complaining about. Now, I know that God could reach down from heaven and fix it all, and one day in heaven he will do that. But for the here and now, he doesn't seem to be much interested in fixing it all, and I suppose, why should he? It's our mess. So we need to learn the lesson that that's life. Life is not always fair. How about this? Life has risk. Everything has risk. Life is not a piece of cake or a walk in the park, as we sometimes might say. Life is quite challenging, and everything we do in life comes with risk. Solomon says, whoever digs a pit might actually fall into it and hurt themselves. If someone is working on the house and breaking through the wall of the house, they might be bitten by a snake that was nesting in those clay walls that they had. Or if someone digs out stones from a quarry, they could get injured. Someone splits logs. They could get hurt by the logs. You see, that's how life operates. Now think about it. Everything we do has risk. You drive a car. We all drive cars. We take them for granted. We teach our teens how to drive cars. And yet we know there are car accidents every day, some fatalities. We look at the risk, and then we get behind the wheel, we drive a car. I fly in airplanes when I travel long distances. Now, my stomach just drops every time I go up and drops when we come down, but I know the statistics, and for a long trip, I'm safer in a plane than I am driving my car by myself. I fly the plane. I take the risk. Now, you could say, I'm not going to take any risk. I'm going to stay at home and be safe. And then in bed while you're sleeping, a fire could break out at your house, or carbon monoxide poisoning while you sleep, or mold spores have been building, and over weeks of time, you're starting to get sick. And think about this. My wife went in the garage this week just to pick up something, and there's a snake. What's a snake doing in our garage? I think about that every time I'm out doing yard work each week, and I'm trimming the brush, and I'm looking to see the snakes because they're there. I see them quite often. And even the small wood bear. Our neighborhood has a bear that scrounges around our garbage cans. I think about that risk when I take the garbage out at night. You see, life has risk. Everything we do has risk. And what we do is weigh the risk. We determine if it's too great or if it's worth the risk. Our assessment will not always be the same. We'll disagree. Skydiving, I say no way. Others of you say, oh, it's worth it. It's safe, and you've done it and had a great time. Coronavirus. We're all assessing the risk and not the same way. How close should you get to someone? Wear a mask or don't wear a mask? And should you visit your older relatives or stay away? Should you attend a funeral or not get in the crowd? And if I were to catch it, would I likely survive it or not? We're assessing the risk. A church has to think like that. Do we resume our worship services now? And if they do resume, will I attend the service? You see, that's life. Everything has risk, and they have to be weighed. Here's another observation on life. One mistake, just one mistake, and it can ruin you. This is the Dead Fly Proverb, one of my favorites from the book of Proverbs. Solomon says, dead flies give perfume a bad smell, and a little foolishness can outweigh wisdom and honor. Dead flies in perfume. You know, back in those days when they would make perfumes and oils and ointments, they'd have those things, they're mixing them up, they're keeping them covered, and even as you uncover and mix, you cover them back, because if insects get into the mix while that's preparing, oh, it can corrupt the gel and mess up the smell. Got to keep those dead flies out. Now, what's that do with our life? Just one mistake. Just one foolish mistake can ruin your life. You know, people will remember the bad thing you did, the stupid thing you did, and you may be thinking, yeah, but what about all the good things I did? They forget that, and they remember this one thing. And if you're thinking, that's not fair, hey, rewind the tape. I've already talked about that. Life isn't fair. And people will remember the foolish thing you did. One foolish mistake, that's all it takes sometimes, just one, and you could lose your job. One mistake, and your marriage could be over. One mistake, and you land in jail. That's life. Let me give you a word to the wise. Think beyond the immediate pleasure. You get ready to do something and it's wrong. Think beyond the fun you'll have at the moment. Think about the long-term implications. And I got to especially say so when I think about social media postings. Listen, folks, what you put on the internet lives there forever. Be careful. Think about the implications, because that's life. One foolish mistake, and it's going to be there for a long, long time. Let me give you another observation on life. You reap what you sow. The seeds you plant determines the kind of harvest that you're going to receive. Now, that's an old classic ancient Proverbs. We find it in the New Testament, the book of Galatians. Paul uses it, but it was also in all the other cultures as well. We find it in a lot of ancient literature. And Solomon has his own version. Solomon says, people will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the produce of their schemes. Or in other words, actions have consequences. And bad actions have bad consequences for those who do bad. Now, sometimes you get the consequences now. And we've seen people get what they deserve. Sometimes, though, it's not now. It's later, the day of reckoning. And every ancient culture believed there will come a day when you have to receive back the bad you put out there. Solomon says you cannot escape the consequences of your bad actions. Evil deeds of the wicked will ensnare them, and the cords of their sins will hold them fast. So a word to the wise, don't do it. Whatever wrong thing you're considering doing, don't do it because you can't get away with it. That's life. You reap what you sow. Give you one more observational life. What matters to God is what really matters, because God always has the final word. A person may think that their own ways are right, Solomon says, but it's the Lord who weighs the heart. Folks, you can think whatever you want to think. You can do whatever you want to do. You can pat yourself on the back and tell yourself you did the right thing, but it's God who'll make the final determination. And it's what God says that really matters. God's thinking trumps everything you and I are thinking. God's judgment will be the final word for our life. So here's a word to the wise. When there's a conflict between your way and God's way, make it God's way. Line yourself up with what God says in His Word. Adjust your thinking to God's thinking. Learn to say no when God says no. Do what is right by God, and God will do what is right for you.